Herzlich willkommen. Und weil der Vortrag sicher unglaublich interessant ist und bestimmt auch ein Werbeblock für mein Lieblingsfach Mathematik, bin ich gleich ruhig und übergebe an Joanne Halpern, die uns Frau Professor Hölzle vorstellt.
Okay, thank you so much, Katharina, and thank you to your team as well for the excellent collaboration and organization of this lecture series. It's just been a pleasure working with you. And I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Professor Dr. Katharina Hölzle. She's chair of the research group IT Entrepreneurship at the Hasso-Plattner Institute for Digital Engineering in Potsdam, Germany. Before she joined HPI, she was chair for innovation management and entrepreneurship at the University of Potsdam. She's published articles in the field of entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, and project management in leading journals throughout the world. She's the deputy chair of the Expertenkommission, which is the Commission of Experts for Research and Innovation of Germany, and she's a member of the German government's High Tech Forum. She's also a visiting professor at the University of International Business and Economics in Beijing, China, and Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. Professor Hölzle is editor-in-chief of the journal Creativity and Innovation Management, and her research focuses on digital entrepreneurship, digital innovation and transformation, and digital ecosystems. Professor Hölzle, we are delighted to have you here today and looking forward to hearing your talk. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Joanne. Thank you, Katharina, for the nice introduction. I'm thrilled to be with you today. And let me share my screen. Hopefully this is going to work out. Let me know you're seeing my screen. And you see, okay, there we go. All right, so whoa. There will be no mathematics, Katharina, I'm afraid. I'm still thinking how to incorporate that, but let's see. But what I will definitely talk about is this new normal and also what this actually means for us and what we hopefully can learn from that for our future, because one thing has become clear in the last month that, wow, world can change quite rapidly, quite dramatically in a short time. And I think although this experience has not been the most pleasant for many of us, it will have definitely impacted our thinking, hopefully also our doing, and also the way we see ourselves, our society in the future. So this is what my talk will be about, next to the many buzzwords Joanne mentioned, which many of you might already be very familiar. If we talk about entrepreneurship and innovation, I'm also teaching foresight, more on a technology foresight level, but I'll try to kind of apply this into what does this now actually mean for you. So Joanne already gave you a short overview about myself. I brought some pictures because I'm always a little curious when I see and listen to a person speaking, what's actually that person behind that screen now? And as Joanne pointed out, I'm a professor at the Hasso-Plattner Institute for almost 1.5 years now. But before that, there have been many different steps that kind of led me to who I am today. And as you will learn in the progress of my presentation, the past is actually quite important for the future. And the way we treat our past and the way it treated us actually influences our way of looking in the future quite dramatically. So born and raised in Flensburg, which is a little town far up in the north of Germany. That's the very first picture you see in the upper left corner. I moved to the Black Forest, south of Germany, to Karlsruhe to study business engineering. I had the great possibility to also obtain a Master of Business Administration at the University of Georgia. And after finishing my studies, I decided first to join the real world, working for a consultancy, a management consultancy, and then for a Californian a Bay startup based in Santa Monica, where I spent a couple of months. And after that 5 years in learning how actually business really works, I rejoined academia. I went to the Technical University of Berlin. I got my PhD. We moved to Potsdam as a family with two small kids at that point in time. And Potsdam has been home since then, since 2011. I've spent half a year in Sydney. Joanne pointed out that I'm a visiting professor to the Macquarie University and University of Technology, and I'm also regularly visiting Beijing, although not for the last 2 years, as you might imagine. And I'm quite interested to see how this whole thing will actually work out with the Chinese relations. I did like to teach there. The students were great. You see a picture in the middle of the Chinese students trying to build a business idea. Other than that, family, 3 kids. My oldest daughter is currently started to study. Second one is taking the Abitur, and the little one, which he doesn't like to be called, is 14 now. And what you can see here, so the expert commission that hands over the expert report to the Chancellor Merkel. Obviously, this year, this was all virtual. So although the 6 of us were allowed to be in one room, the Chancellor and also our Minister, Anja Karliczek, were only there in virtual with us. And another picture, this is the high-tech forum. So this thing about how policy actually happens, quite an interesting experience. If you have any questions for that, I'm more than happy to answer them. And here in the last picture, you can see my team here at Hasso-Plattner Institute. Obviously, that was our last team outing in the summer. You can see that this was COVID, right? So this really shortly about myself, and what I would like to do now is to learn a little bit more about what your thoughts are about the future. I heard before that some of you are in the classroom, so if you have a smartphone ready, please just use that one now. I'm just going to start the mentee survey. So if you could let me know what you think about the future. This can be just one word or maybe 2 words. So whatever comes to your mind, how the future could look like. Let me know whether it works or not. So if you go to mentee.com and then please use the code 49614430. Excellent. Wow, these are 2 strong words there already. Thank you. So fair, drat, artificial intelligence. What else? All right, so I'll give it a couple of more seconds. Thank you very, very much for this and also for your openness. I think it's quite interesting that we see fear basically in the middle. This is something I usually see with my students as well, which makes me actually quite sad, because I think it's really kind of, it shows how society, we as older generation, maybe also politics, are currently treating the world, that you as young people actually look into the future and you're afraid or you are uncertain. I see a lot of uncertainty here as well. And I think by using futurist thinking or this futurist literacy, hopefully might help you to overcome or at least actively encounter this fear, to hopefully look forward to more of this innovation, possibility, change. It is Hoffnung and hope we should have, but at the same time, with all those things going on, we feel that, oh, okay, we are not really sure. So let me go back to my presentation, and let's kind of, take it from there, and hopefully in the end, you'll have a little bit of a more optimistic, or at least a more active-oriented perspective, how we actually might all be working together to encounter this fear and to work together to make this future a little more promising, as many of you might see it now. There's one thing, and this has not only been clear since the last 14 months, we live in a so-called VUCA world. This is a phrase that is often used in management, business, and it's the abbreviation of volatility. So, lack of stability, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. It's uncertain. A lot of change. You also named change and uncertainty. It's hard to actually foresee what changes will happen. It is rather complex. It's not only one country, one society, one school, one city anymore. It's a multitude of people, of societies, of countries, of technologies, of developments happening, and it's ambiguous. So it's really kind of hard to say this is the one right path. It's not black or white anymore. It's gray, right? Different shades of gray, lots of them. So a prominent German author said last year, there is no normal anymore, and there's also no new normal. The only thing we know is that there is permanent change. And the only thing we actually can do is to go without fear, to have confidence and courage to actually tackle those futures, because obviously there will be not only one. There will be not only one path for you, there will be multiple paths, and no one can tell you right now which path will be the right one, and for how long you have to stay on that path. And I would like to encourage you to accept this change in your life. And also, it's okay to have that fear. It's okay to be afraid. We all are. We don't, it's like, if we learned one thing over the last month, is that we don't know. But we can try to actually encounter this better. So how does this translate now? Definitely there's no business as usual. There's no normal anymore. It's, I already mentioned it, internationalization, digitization, everything we have been teaching, we have been learning, your parents learned, your grandparents learned, is not the only possibility anymore. So we have to kind of deal with this. We all know that it's so much nicer if there's only one truth. It's so much nicer if someone tells you, okay, do this, because then you don't have to think. You don't have to encounter this complexity. So many of us, you know, sometimes hope that it would be great to have only this one street, but we don't have. And it's the sooner we realize that our life is complex, the better we're off. For those of you, and here again, you know, living in Silicon Valley, New York, Washington, D.C., Montreal, I heard, you know, you all know technology is everywhere. But this whole thing about digitization is not only about technology. It heavily influences how we behave, online, offline, our values, and at the same time also the potentials and the barriers. And there's one thing I learned over the last month and years. We've been working together with many companies here in Germany, and the digital technologies are never the problem, never. It's always the human. It's always the humans that don't want to change. It's always about them saying, okay, I don't need this, right? Some of you mentioned AI, you know, who needs AI? You know, this fears, you know, I'm afraid of this. So we really have to have this interrelationship of humans and technology. And one last thing, there's one thing we know, the future is exponential. But we as humans are not good in exponential thinking. And Anton Bartlett said that already years and decades ago, and it's still the case. And I have a little game I like to ask you. So if you are offered a job for 7 weeks, you can choose your salary. There's either the possibility you get $100 for the first day, $200 for the second, $300 for the third day, and every day you get $100 more, which is quite nice, right? But the other possibility is you start with 1 cent per day, and then you get 2 for the second, and it doubles every day. So which salary would you actually, okay, there's the mathematics, Katharina, actually. I forgot. There was that little part in there.
I see the checkerboard in front of me.
Exactly. So again, for those of you who are on Mentee, let's see what you prefer. For those of you who are in the classrooms, that's fine as well. You can just you can take just you know, write it down. So option 1 was $100 more every day. Option 2 was doubling your salary, but you're starting with 1 cent. All right. Okay. Now we're biased, right? We are nudging. Someone taking option 1. You guys, this is all right. Thank you. Thank you for doing it. So you know, if I play this with my German students, you know, many of them like to take option 1. So it's probably because of this great school you're going to that has taught you the value of exponential thinking. Because obviously, option 2 is the one that provides you with a lot more. And let me look at my cheat sheet. So in the end, you are, there are a lot of numbers, right? It's 5 billion, I think, just messing up with the German and the English set, but exactly, this is it, right? So the chess game, the emperor and the chess and the rice, you probably heard about, Katharina already spoiled it. It's so hard for humankind to understand that if we start really slow with a really low number, but we double, that this actually messes up a lot. And this is exactly what technology is doing these days. And this is what AI is doing. And this is what platforms are doing. They're not just increasing linearly, they are increasing exponentially. And this is already one important thing to keep in mind if we think about the future, that this exponential thinking is something that you need to consider in the way how you look at the future. And this is also what hopefully will help all of you, because for you it's normal that this is the way you should think. And this differentiates you from our generation, the generation before, that we're slowly on that way to actually getting accustomed to this exponential change. And that already gives you a good outlook in the future and actually dealing with that. So what is this futurist literacy? You know, why am I talking about this? And I kind of started with drawing a frame around this. But what is this? If you look at those competencies you need, and hopefully you have seen this before, again, if I show this to my first semester students, either bachelor or master, many of them are quite surprised if I tell them, actually, you know what? The only thing you should be focusing on are those competencies in the middle, because actually all the other things you either have learned in school, and if you haven't learned them in school, you need to do that by yourself. But the competences you need to actually master the future, and the character qualities you need to deal with this changing environment, these are those. And the pure knowledge, that's, you know, you find that in the internet, you can always look at it. But what you should focus on, and what we as educational institutions, and just judging from what I read and heard about your school, this is already in your focus. This is what you need. This is the way what also makes us as humans different from computers, different from technology, because the creativity part, that collaboration part, that adaptability in surprising situations, that is something that technology cannot do yet. And probably, depending on who you talk to from the computer science department, that will take a little longer. So this is your core competency. This is where you go to. And this adaptability, this creativity, and again, you are probably raised in this growth mindset about, well, I can learn anything I want to. It's, you know, I make mistakes, that's okay. I can only tell you that in Germany, the high school system, the whole school system, also the universities, they are a lot focused on the fixed mindsets. And this is something I really struggle with, because many students come and ask about, okay, what do I need to do to get an A in that exam? And they get really frustrated if I tell them, I don't know. And they're like, well, you're the professor, right? You should tell me. And I'm like, well, but you know, this is your learning journey. And there are many different ways of actually getting an A in that final exam. But this is really hard in Germany. So again, I would be really interested to hear your thoughts about this, whether my assumption that you are all raised in this growth mindset is actually true, or whether there are always also parts of the fixed mindset of, you know, just taking the sheet and just coloring inside the lines, because that's what is expected. So the futures literacy, if I'm to build on the brain, the scientist, Real Miller, behind futures literacy, is that this is your ability to imagine your future. At the same time, it's also your perception of success when this future will finally arrive. And you see, these are two different things, right? It's imagining the future, it's thinking about the future in different ways. And then once this happens, actually determine, is this now success for me or not? So what you see here is, even if the future turns out the way not how you imagined, it could still be a success for you because you are defining it that way, right? So the better you are in this flexibility of mind, and the better you understand what are different ways and paths of actually understanding the future, the better you will be, or you are equipped to seize the future opportunities and to grasp this change and to hopefully soothe this fear inside you. So this is what future literacy is about. Now, let's take another quick exercise. If you imagine traveling 20 years into the future, which is actually quite a lot, I know, and you have already been mentioning different future possibilities in our world cloud. I saw Mars, I saw space colonization, but just take a couple of minutes, take a piece of paper, take your smartphone, just take your mind if you want. What do you see, right? And try to be very specific. So imagining 2041, end of April, we don't know how the weather will look like. We don't know how your school will look like, but just try to get in that mindset. So what do you see? I mean, what do you see you see a stadium or an airport? What will people be doing? Will things look differently? Maybe not. Maybe it's very hot, very cold. All right, so if you want to finish your thoughts, that's fine. You know, usually will take a little longer if I do this exercise with my students, but then again, we're in a designated lecture. This is what they are, they expect. So, feel free to kind of follow up on your ideas and thoughts maybe later after this presentation. What I wanted to kind of get you in the mood is to think about this, because what I would like to share, or kind of also share with you, I guess, is if we had the possibility now to be all in one room and we would now start to talk about your perspectives, and we already saw from the world cloud that there are quite some different perspectives, is that everyone thinks differently about the future. So every one of us will now have a specific picture, image in their heads, and that's good. But futures thinking is actually then also taking the next step. It's about talking about this, it's about discussing this. And unfortunately, right now in this setting, we cannot do this. But please, take this with you if we talk about futurist thinking. It's not only your individual thinking, it's the thinking of everyone. And this learning from others and getting to know about their ideas is a very important step in this futurist literacy. So get as many different perspectives, get as many point of views, because, one thing is certain, and you saw that on one of the prior slides, we need to do it collectively. We need to do it collaboratively, because otherwise we will not be able to actually get further. So quick question again, sorry, I kind of make you think. There are two statements, and I'd like you to pick A or B, and then for the second statement, C or D. So read through this, what will happen in the future is mostly set, and it will follow the path we are already on. Do you believe that this is true? Then take an A. If you think that the future holds many possibilities and is not yet determined, take a B. Second statement, if you think that we don't really have much individual influence over what the future will be, take a C. If you rather think that we do have a great deal of individual influence over how the future will be, then take a D. Now take A or B, C or D. Let's go back to Mentimeter. Let me start it, and let's see who we are here, who we have here in the room. So what combination are you? A, C, A, D, B, C, or B, D? Okay, I lost the connection. Now that's interesting. Okay, we have 2, 4 map makers, navigators, explorers, observers, more observers, 1 navigator, many map makers. All right. One more observer, explorer. Oh yeah, here now comes the explorers. Excellent. 2 navigators. Okay, need to figure out how to find our way, I guess. All right, now what does that mean? Okay, more map makers. Thank you. Let's have a look. What are those? What are those different types? And obviously, this is not a personality test. I'll just had to take a personality test myself. It's not my favorite. So observers, we had 5, 7 observers, I think. So they are the ones who are watching what is happening around them, right? So they really like to get us on a path. They believe that, we can notice if we pay attention. So they watch out for the future, but they don't necessarily shape it. But we need them. We need those observers because they actually tell us what it is, where we are, right? Now the navigators, we only had 2 navigators. Interesting. So they know where the ship is headed, but they also now know that, we have to take some steps to actually navigate the ship in that direction. They do know that the decisions and actions help us to get there. So usually navigators are quite confident. However, they don't like uncertainty. If you're sailing on a boat and my husband is a vivid sailor, he really likes to know where we're heading if we leave the harbor in the morning. So explorers, we had almost as many explorers as observers. So they see the possibilities. They go up in the mountains, right? They believe that the future is not yet determined, but it will unfold. And our However, you know, our individual actions don't really lead us to too much, so they will not influence so much. They are dreamers, which is great. We need those dreamers. We need those visionaries because they kind of, you know, they know where they want to go. However, they're a little skeptical whether we're going to reach it. So map makers, we have many map makers, you know, the majority of those of you who were on Mentee were map makers. They make their decisions. They are the ones that actually tell the navigators where to go to. So my oldest daughter always tries to be the map maker for my husband. She's like, yeah, let me, you know, I'll take the map, you know, I'll figure it out. So, you know, they believe that our decisions and actions determine how the future turns out. So I'm quite happy to see that many of you see themselves as map makers. So take this with you. However, you know, independent of who you are, and obviously, you know, as I said, this is not a great personality test, but it kind of, you know, just was supposed as a little exercise. We need all four of you. We need all of these different types. And what is really, really important is that all four of these types, you know, you have an active role to play. And for many, many years, we thought there's only this one future. This is what I said before, you know, there's low uncertainty. We know there's only one path. And years ago, kind of, we figured out that actually, no, there's not only one future, there are alternate futures. There's a moderate uncertainty, but, you know, there are distinct options, and it can be either A, B, C, or D. Now, what we know now is because of digital technologies, about business models changing at exponential pace, the futures are ambiguous. They, you know, it's a range of potential futures, or it might even be that we don't have a clue yet what those different potential futures can look like. So this is now where foresight comes into place. And as I said, I'm teaching foresight at the university. I'm also working with many companies in that aspect of technology foresight, because they have to understand that this is not, the left side is not true anymore. You know, just get rid of it. This is not going to happen. We are in the right in the right part. And it's either about ambiguous futures or it is about true ambiguity. So question is, okay, Professor Hölzle, interestingly said, but how do we do it? And again, planning, especially in Germany, is really important. You know, Germans love to plan, obviously. So, you know, this is what they did and what many of them are still doing. And if I tell them, actually, no, it will only lead us so far. And also, if you do a forecasting, which actually, you know, is just a little bit more educated planning, you know, if we're talking about uncertainty, about ambiguity, and time horizon goes, we need foresight. Sometimes we even need hope if uncertainty is really high. So this foresight, you know, what is it? Now, foresight comes from the equation that if we think about where does the future come from, it is influenced by trends, and I'm going to explain that in just a second, events and unknowns. And those lead to change. And many of you already mentioned the word change in the word cloud. So if we take that change and add it up to our present, then this is what future is, right? So again, if we want to predict the future, we need to understand our present times. We need to understand where change comes from. And only then we can start to actually think about the future. So if we think about trends, events, and unknowns, what are these? Trends change over time. They can be expressed as more or less, and I'll have an example for you in a minute. Events change at specific moments in time. You know, it can be the result of you making a choice of joining that university or a different university or no university at all, or you deciding to start playing soccer or rather go for swimming. It can also be out of your control. You know, there can be an event like a car accident. There can be an event of meeting the love of your life. You know, that's also sometimes outside of human control. This is an event. And then obviously there are the unknowns. You know, 9/11 was clearly an unknown. COVID-19 was somehow an unknown, although many experts claim that it was actually not that unknown, but many governments decided to not, you know, listen to the experts before. And these three things, the trends, the events, and the unknowns, actually drive that change. And if we talk about trends, there's a huge, you know, own scientific discipline, if you want, that's actually looking at those trends. And if we talk about mega trends, and these are the mega trends identified by the University of Sydney, they're saying, you know, what we really need to consider if we think about the future, it is obviously technology, but technology also is changing these days. It's about how communities evolve, right? Younger versus older generations, the millennials. It's about rapid urbanization. You know, we're seeing larger and larger cities getting created in the world. It's about empowering individuals. Individuals have never been as rich before as they are, never been connected as they are before. So the role of the individual in the society has completely changed. And obviously in societies like the American or the German society, a lot more than we look into the countries of the global south, for example, but this is also changing. Economic power shift, obviously, middle class kind of, you know, going to the edges. At the same time, also the difference between the countries of the global south and also of the so-called industrialized nations. And last but not least, probably one of the, you know, one of the most important megatrends, the resource security. So, you know, resources are depleting. So what do we do with these? So these things, trends, events, and unknowns, they drive change. And if you want to understand change, which is part of this futures literacy, is you have to understand four things. First of all, the source of change. So the change that happens to us from the world, but also the change that we apply to the world. So how the world is impacted by us. Second, the enterprise, and again, please excuse me for using this business term. So it's families, school systems, governments, companies. So the surrounding that is changing. Second. Third, the time horizon. You know, I ask you to imagine yourself 20 years from now, which is really long term, right? But also it's the short term, right? We don't know what will be in a year. You know, we were hoping that we would be in a different situation a year ago. We're not, at least not in Germany, not getting better. And fourth, the rate of change. Are we talking about incremental change, slow change? Are we talking about discontinuous change, change that happens quite suddenly and has a big impact? So those four things are important if we talk about change and if we try to understand that change, because only if we understand change, we can actually actively influence it, right? So if you want to be a change maker, you have to understand how that change happens and how you can actually influence it. And in order to understand that, you need to understand the past. Because, you know, we all live in the present, and it's always hard for us to understand that actually, oh, wow, you know, this is quite different than 20 years ago. So if you look back at the time of your grandparents or your parents even, you actually realize how much things have changed. And one of my favorite examples is the Red Flag Act. And you might or might not have heard about that, but when the automobile was introduced, it was required that there's one person walking up in front of that automobile with a red flag saying, danger approaching, right? There's a car, there's a vehicle coming. So if you look at streets these days, you're like, oh, wow, you know, that has changed. That was in 1896. So yeah, it is 125 years ago, but yeah, you know, it's not that long ago. So, you know, just imagining how that change has been happening and how we are different now than we used to be, you know, talking to the older generation gives you a better understanding of also understanding maybe why this older generation sometimes really struggles with understanding you, right? And like, you know, making funny comments about what is it, what you're doing. So if we were on this road together to do a forecasting, you know, this is what we would do. We would apply the so-called STEEP checklist. STEEP stands for Society, Technology, Environment, Economics, and Politics, trying to understand, you know, what has changed in the past and how they might actually change in the future. So if I do forecasting with my students, you know, this is kind of where we start, trying again to understand what every individual sees and what we see as a group together. How is change, you know, how is change happening? How has change happened in the past to actually get a better understanding for the future, okay? So coming to the end, taking a sip of water. If we now take this all together, saying, okay, great, you know, we have understood trends are shaping, events are happening, unknowns are happening, they drive change. We need to understand change. We need to understand the 4 attributes of change. We need to understand the present, which leads us to understand the past, or understanding the past leads us to understand the present. Then this will help us to understand the future, to have this kind of future skills. And one instrument, and again, you know, there are lots of different instruments you can use for future foresight, is scenario analysis. And the scenario actually creates, you know, a little bit like you hopefully did in this little exercise when you thought about how will the future be in 20 years, trying to create an image of how the future will be. But we're not only doing this by being very creative, using scenario analysis, we use, you know, different steps. We're using, for example, this STEEP checklist, different perspectives, qualitative perspectives. We're using expert interviews, we're using quantitative data to put it all together in either global scenarios or industry scenarios, technology scenarios. And the most important thing about the scenario is that it tries to provide a coherent and communicatable picture of the future. Because what we have learned in foresight is you need to tell a story. You need to tell a story to people so that they understand what you're aiming at and what you want them to see and what you want them to believe. And that helps to stimulate a discussion, to actually, you know, get everyone outside maybe even of their comfort zone to say, no, I disagree. You know, you're telling me in 20 years we will all be using helicopters to go to work. I disagree. This will not going to happen. There will be no helicopters anymore because actually we will not have the materials. And these are the discussions we aim to stimulate in companies, but also on the political arena, because we need to have those different perspectives. And this is where scenario analysis is actually a great tool. Now, one of the most famous companies in this respect is actually Royal Dutch Shell. They started in the 70s when there was a short period in time where we actually were thinking that there will not be enough gas anymore and oil. And obviously Shell is an oil company, and they really had to think about, you know, will we be surviving? Will we continue to exist? And they developed some great capabilities and skills, and I have been working with them for quite some time in applying and using those scenarios. And so if you're interested, I was planning to show you one video. Now I'm running a little bit out of time. So actually I will, obviously you will get all of my slides and also then also the link to this video. So, you know, if you're interested, please have a look at it. They are really good. They are really good in explaining this scenario analysis and also how to use them. So to sum it up, scenarios are one instrument to actually apply this futurist literacy. You know, it's one part of it, it's one tool. Another tool, as you hopefully have understood now, is taking this past, present, future framework. So, you know, if you choose your topic about your personal life in 10 years from now, or the future of water supply in your city, you know, you have to think about the past. We take the water supply, you know, where do we come from? How many water resources do we have? Where did we use to get our water from? Where do we get it from right now? And how might we actually get water in the future? And you know, I'm sorry to kind of repeating myself, but the experience I made is if you don't consider the past and you don't consider the present and you only look in the future, it's very improbable that it's going to happen, because you need to know kind of where you come from, right? So you need to know this, and then obviously it's about telling a good story. So I would expect, maybe, hopefully, you have learned the value of storytelling, good storytelling in school. If you haven't done so, please do. It always helps, you know, if you want to pitch your business idea, if you want to make a good impression on your teacher, if you want to make a good impression on your future professors, if you want to do a scenario, it's all about telling a good story. And the hero's journey can help, you know, a hero all pumped up, going on an endeavor. Most of the times it doesn't work as they imagine it to be. They have a little bit of troubles, but in the end they succeed, definitely. And we are human beings. We all love good stories. And you know, if you think about the future in that kind of hero's journey, that can help you to maybe, you know, shed a little bit off that fear, because it makes the future more approachable and actually then also manageable for yourself. You know, take it just step by step. And once we draft that story, we draft that scenario, we draft that future, again, it helps us to talk with others. It helps us to get others on board, and it helps you to actually also understand what I'm really aiming for. So to sum it up, know your past. It helps you to make those assumptions, and it lets you understand where you come from, but also where your teammates come from. Again, it's a collective endeavor. Don't do it yourself. You know, don't do it all by yourself. You can start it, but I would always encourage you to have at least one person to share it with. Embrace the present. So where do you start from? What's your base? And then conquer the future. You know, it is. I know it's scary, and I know that, you know, you might feel that you're just a very small wheel in this whole ecosystem. But you guys, you are our future, all of you, and you should use us, the older generation, to help you, to support you. Talk to as many different people as you can. You know, as I said, it's not a one-person endeavor. Think about a good story. Take the people with you. Take the people with you on your journey, on a joint journey, on the journey of your local neighborhood, your community, maybe even your society. And well, good luck. I hope I could kind of give you a little bit of an insight of, what is this futurist literacy? Can it be learned? Yes, it can. It is a literacy. At the same time, it's a competence. And it's a personality trait, but I believe it can be learned, and I hope I kind of gave you a little bit of a perspective, a little bit of insight. Again, I mean, usually, I have a semester, I have a 3-month to give a first insight into this foresight and futures topic. So hopefully this has been and will be a starting point for some of you. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining me in the Mentimeter, and I'm looking forward to your questions. And
Thank you so much.